Up next, a review of some dry brushes from Artify. Hey guys, and welcome back to another Mr. Modeler. In this video I'm going to be reviewing a product for you. This is a 5-piece dry brush set from Artify. Now, dry brushing is a technique many of us modelers use to varying degrees. I myself have used it in the past for just weathering and maybe some application of highlights, but haven't really used it a lot. Artify asked if I'd be interested in reviewing this brush set with you guys, and it intrigued me because I honestly didn't know they made brushes specifically for dry brushing, but although I'm not surprised because they make product for everything. In the past, what I've done for brushes is I've basically taken old brushes, once the brush starts to fray, kind of set them aside in a pile. When I'm ready to do some dry brushing, that's what I pull from. Once I'm done with the technique, I just toss them because it's pretty harsh on a brush to do this, and so I usually just discard them when I'm done. Now, in getting ready for this review, I decided to do a little research here and look into dry brushing because, as I said, I've done this only to a limited extent, and I quickly found that you can do a lot more with dry brushing than just doing a little bit of weathering. In fact, some particular modelers use dry brushing to achieve a gradient finish, much like you would using an airbrush or wet blending. And the other thing I've learned about is something called a texture palette, which I wasn't familiar with either, and I'll talk about that shortly. Now, as I viewed these videos, there were two other companies that came up. One was Army Painter, and the other one was Artist Opus. Both of those companies produce dry brushes, and Army Painter is the lesser cost of the two. Their brushes run around $20 or so for a set of 3, I believe. And then Artist Opus produces a set that's going to look similar to what I'm going to be showing you here. It comes with 4 brushes, and it is sold at a cost of around $100. This particular brush set is reasonably priced, under $25, and I'll post a link down below if you're interested in looking at this after this review. And so before we get started here, what I'm going to do is take a look at what comes inside this set, and then we'll jump into using the dry brushes on a couple of pieces from a project that I'm working on. So as mentioned, this is similar to the one available from Artist Opus, but Artify's comes with 5 sizes instead of 4. Starting from this large one that is labeled 13.5, followed by an 11, 7, 5, and a 3 for finer detailing. Included in the set are 2 other little containers, one that has a sponge in it, and the other has soap. So a few things to mention here before I get started. Artify, by the way, is a US-based company that has produced brushes for traditional painting for some time. These dry brushes are their first attempt at getting into the mini coloring market, which I can only imagine has expanded since the advent of 3D printing. And not only are people printing those figures, but they're also printing all sorts of things, including miniatures and land terrain, all these things that you use for board gaming. And dry brushing is such an essential technique to be able to do. This particular set now is available on Amazon for around just a little under $22, and they do have a set that's a little less than that that does not include the soap and the sponge, in case you're interested. Both of those links are posted below, and they are affiliate links, so by clicking on those you do help support the channel, and I do appreciate that. Also, I want to mention now that Artify did send along a fine detailing brush set, so this is something they also have available for painting miniatures and figures. And this comes with a lot of different brushes. As I mentioned in the past, it's so essential to have brushes of good quality and be able just to have the right brushes in general for doing the job. And so unfortunately I did not have a chance to use this set in the demonstration that I have going on here, because the figures that are associated with the pieces I'll be painting were already detailed. All the faces were painted in already. So but I definitely look forward to using this set in the future. This set runs around $29 or so, and the link to this is below as well. Well, let's go ahead and get started now with using the set on a couple of pieces, as I mentioned. And I can tell you, just kicking it off here, that after my experience using these brushes and putting together this video, I have a feeling I'll be using this technique a lot more often. Let's go ahead and get started with the pieces now. All right, well, it's time to test out these brushes, so let's give it a shot here. What we got is a piece which is a display for a Dungeons and Dragons figure. This is from the animated series. I'll show you the figure once I'm done here, but this is the display base, and it's going to be one that joins up with some other ones. And so we've got a lot of texture here on this piece. And so it'd be a good example to try and use our brushes with here. So what I wanted to show you here now is a texture palette. Now this is a small palette. This certainly can be printed a lot bigger. And they do have some for sale that have different types of textures. But this is a good way, as you can see, I was experimenting with this already, to test your brush. Also maybe to test technique, and even just to dab paint from or onto prior to dry brushing the piece you're going to be working on. Now the other thing you can use to dab your paint onto is this stuff here. This is just packing foam. What you don't want to do is you don't want to use a paper towel because dry brushing actually requires a little bit of moisture, and the paper towel is going to draw that out from your brush. What you're trying to avoid now are brush strokes, because that's the one thing about dry brushing is you can actually, if not done properly, you can see the brush lines across your piece, and that's just not going to look very natural. That is the reason why our set again comes with a sponge. We're going to wet the sponge a little bit here so we can get a little moisture on our brush, and we will give this a shot. So let's go ahead and use one of the larger brushes here. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and use the largest one to start off with here. And so let's go ahead and put a drop on our sponge here. Now, I've actually never used a wet brush when dry brushing. I always thought it's got to be as dry as possible. And I've seen some people who do dry brush a lot not really use this because it didn't work out for them, but I'm going to go ahead and try it here because that is what is recommended. And what we've got here for our paint is a mix of this gray and this raw umber. And so let's go ahead and get some of this on our brush now. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and wipe some of it off here. So the first thing we want to do is actually stipple, because dry brushing likes texture. Now, the piece here has been primed with black, and as you can see, it already has some nice texture, but we're going to add some more fine texture here all along the surface. Next, we're going to go ahead and start swiping from side to side here. The fact that we're seeing brush strokes tells us we have the brush is still too wet. And we're just kind of gliding along the surface there, where we have those peaks that are showing through. Next, we're going to go in kind of a swirl or circular motion here, and you can see how it's starting to fill in all of these different sections here. And again, we're trying to avoid the look of brush strokes here. Alright, so I'm going to do this just a little further, and then I'm going to go ahead and let this dry, and we're going to apply our second color here in just a second. Okay, so we have various shades of brown that you can see throughout the piece now. And what I want to do is to finish off with the highlights. So what I'd like to do actually is add in just a tiny bit of blue and some gray for those highlights. So we're going to go ahead and mix our base color we initially started with some blue here. I'm going to use our smaller brush here so I can be a bit more exact. Most of this I'm just kind of winging it here. I really don't have a particular strategy in mind. I just thought it would be nice to add a little bit more color variation. And in some areas that I think I went too far, I can bring back some of the browns just by dipping our brush back into this reddish brown color. Alright, so here's the finished piece, and what I was shooting for was a rock base here that had some grayish and brown tones, just like what I ended up with. And yeah, the dry brushing worked well. So I'm going to go ahead and put the figure now and show you what it looks like complete. Okay, now this is now the completed figure of Sheila from the animated Dungeons and Dragons series. This is from the early 1980s, and this figure was beautifully designed by UEL from CG Trader. Now the figure is mostly airbrush, with the exception of the face and the hair. I hand brushed those. The cape was also airbrushed, and I used the dry brushes to give us a bit brighter highlights along these peaks here, because I had a little trouble aiming the airbrush, and so it helped out having those dry brushes to add those in. So this is one of 5 other figures in the set that I'll be working on, and my hope is to bring these to Wonderfest. So now that this is done, let me go ahead and pull out another piece that we can experiment with using our dry brush set. Well, here's the other display base I wanted to share with you. I did not bother recording the process of doing this because it was the same as the last one, but I did want to draw your attention to this color effect I was able to achieve here with the dry brush. So this is the display base that goes to Bobby the Barbarian. You can see the character sitting there in the background, and he wields this very strong club that can do all sorts of things. If you look at this page from CG Trader, this is UEL's page showing the character on the display base, and he's got this really cool effect there at the front, and it's of course depicting the power of that club, and I thought it was a really cool thing to add on to the display, so I attempted to do that here with the dry brushes, and you can see I'm just using the dry brush technique to apply different shades of color, starting with a yellow and then applying some reds and some oranges. And this is how it turned out. I don't think I would have been able to achieve this with an airbrush as easily. What's nice is that I'm able to retain the darker undertones here that you see. I was able to apply the same technique to the club. So just like in the picture, the effect is seen on the display base and at the front tip of his club. All right, let me go ahead and take a minute to assemble the character, and I'll show you what the display base and the character look like together. All right, here we have the completed figure and display base, and yeah, I'm very pleased with how it all turned out. The dry brushes worked perfectly for this project. This really helped me achieve a lot when it came to the look of the display, and certainly contributed to the details seen on the character. I did use the dry brushing for the loincloth, as well as the boots and the club, but also ended up using the dry brushing on the logo. This is the nameplate that comes with the files now, nicely fashioned after the logo that you see on the TV show. And this is me using the dry brushes now to apply the yellows and oranges. I first colored all of the letters yellow and dry brushed a red orange, and also added in a little orange to the yellow. And this is how it all turned out. And of course we have Sheila that I showed you earlier. These are the 2 figures here put together. And the way this is all going to work is each figure has its own display base. So when all the figures are completed, it'll make a nice display of all the characters together. So we still have Hank the Archer, we have Presto the Magician, we have Eric the Cavalier, and Diana the Acrobat. And there also is a sculpt for Venger and Shadow Demon together. So those are going to be a lot of fun to work on. So as mentioned, I'm really happy with the way it all turned out here, and I'm really glad I went through this experience because it's given me a whole new look on dry brushing. Definitely look forward to using the technique more often. So I'm going to give this a very positive review. A few things to note here. 1, the brushes are made for dry brushing, so way better results than what I used to get in the past with those old brushes. And having brushes that are made for this technique allows you to get the most out of it and to employ the technique as it's meant to be done. I do like that it includes brushes of various sizes. You get that large one to help you cover bigger areas, and you get the smaller ones to provide finer detail with more control. They are good quality brushes. I'm confident it's going to last me a long time. And I also like the fact that this set includes the little soap and a sponge. I found it helpful to have those on hand. Now, I know I'm stating the obvious here, but I'm going to say it anyway. The purpose and intention of this review was to look at this particular product and how it compares to what I was doing in the past. I didn't have any intention on getting a hold of the other products and doing a side-by-side comparison. If that's something you'd like to look into, obviously you need to do that research on your own. But I am confident if you get a hold of this product, you'll have just as positive an experience as I have. A couple other points I wanted to make here was the texture palettes. I thought it was interesting that people use these to help them out with dry brushing. The palette that I had here was 3D printed, but you can get a hold of larger palettes that are already pre-made. And again, the purpose of those palettes is to blot your paints onto them so you're not taking the moisture out of the dry brush, which I thought was interesting. So check those out. You can look at, or at least Google texture palette, or go on Etsy and eBay and search the same thing. You'll find some sources to get a hold of one. The other thing I want to mention now too is that the success of dry brushing can be dependent on the quality of paint that you use. Now for this demonstration, I didn't have time to go and get some other paints that were talked about in some of these videos that I had reviewed, but I just ended up using what I had on hand here, which was Vallejo paints and craft paints. Still worked out pretty well for my taste, but if you're going to dry brush more extensively and look more into this, that's something you might want to consider. Lastly, the videos that I left links for, I wanted to point to one in particular by Faux Hammer. This is a great channel. He's got a lot of good content, a lot of different subject matters that he covers there. He's someone who does a lot of figure painting, so he covers also 3D printing, has some great information about settings with printers and stuff like that too. But this particular video I really did enjoy watching and I got a lot out of. He actually invited someone who is really good at dry brushing to join in on the video with him, and so they provided steps and outlines that I followed. So a lot of the steps I took here were based on the information provided there. So if you want to look more into dry brushing, that's another video I'd highly recommend. Okay guys, well that is going to do it for now. Thank you again for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me here on my channel. And lastly, a big thank you to Artify for sending these products to me. It really was a pleasure to carry out this demonstration and provide this information to you guys. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.